All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are tackling a massive topic, literally, an engineering marvel that's been standing for 4,500 years, and it still mystifies us. You know what I'm talking about? The Great Pyramid of Giza.
But you know what? We're not going to start in the ancient past. Nope, we're going to start with a modern mystery. Picture this, a tiny little robot deep inside the pyramid, crawling through these dark, narrow shafts. It hits a dead end, a solid stone slab. The researchers behind it? They were sure something was back there, so they gave the robot a drill. It bores this tiny hole, a camera peeks through, and sees something no human has seen for thousands and thousands of years.
So, to really get our heads around the secrets of this place, you first have to understand the scale we're dealing with. It's just unbelievable. The Great Pyramid of Giza weighs 6 million tons. Just let that number sink in for a second. 6 million tons.
And if you're trying to picture that, well, it's 12 times heavier than the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world today. We're talking 2.3 million stone blocks. And get this, some of them weigh as much as a city bus. So the big question is, how in the world did they do it?
So yeah, that brings us to our first section, an impossible structure. Seriously, how do you even start? How do you build something this huge, this precise, with none of the technology we have today? Okay, first up, finding true north. This is where the genius really begins to show. The pyramid isn't just plopped down in the desert. It's aligned almost perfectly to true north, south, east, and west. I mean, the margin of error is so tiny, it's mind-boggling.
And remember, they didn't have compasses, no satellites, no GPS, none of the fancy tools we rely on. So how did they pull it off? How did they find true north with that kind of accuracy? The answer? Well, it was right above their heads. They used the stars. By watching the pole stars, the ones that barely move in the night sky, they could map out the cardinal directions perfectly. It was celestial alignment. And for them, this wasn't just some technical thing. It was deeply spiritual. They were aligning the pharaoh's tomb with the eternal heavens. So their instruction manual, it wasn't on the ground, it was written in the night sky.
Okay, so they've got their cosmic blueprint locked in. Now for the next huge hurdle, perfecting the foundation. I mean, a sea of stone.
Think about this. The base covers about 13 acres. That's like 9 football fields. And it had to be perfectly, and I mean perfectly level. If they were off by even a tiny bit, the whole thing would be unstable. It would have just collapsed.
So how'd they do it? Well, one of the main theories is just brilliant in its simplicity. They used water. They dug all these trenches around the build site, filled them up with water, and bam, you've got the world's biggest, most accurate water level. Anything sticking up above the waterline, they just chipped it away until it was all flat.
And for checking smaller spots, they probably used a simple tool called an A-frame level, with a little weighted string hanging down the middle. It's so simple and so effective that, builders still use variations of it today. Just incredible.
All right, foundation's perfect, alignment's perfect. Next problem, getting the stones. All 2.3 million of them. This was about to become the greatest stone convoy in history.
So first things first, you have to cut the blocks out of the quarry. But there's a huge problem. Their copper tools, way too soft. They just weren't going to cut it, literally, against something like limestone, never mind the hardest stuff. They needed a major upgrade.
And what they came up with was some really clever early-stage metallurgy. They figured out that if you mix a little bit of arsenic in with the copper, you get arsenical copper, basically an early form of bronze. And that stuff was hard enough to make chisels that could actually carve out those giant blocks. But cutting them was only half the battle. Now you got to move them. And some of these blocks, weighing up to 50 tons, came from a quarry 250 kilometers away. It was an absolute masterpiece of logistics. We're talking huge teams of people loading them onto boats, sailing them down the river, and then dragging them up these enormous ramps to the build site. Just imagine the coordination required for that.
But deep inside the pyramid, for the really important rooms, the pharaoh's chambers, the engineers faced their biggest challenge yet. They had to work with a material that their tools just couldn't handle. Let's talk about the granite enigma.
Yeah, they built the inner chambers with granite. It's the second hardest stone on the entire planet. To give you some perspective, even our modern power tools can have a tough time cutting through this stuff. It's just unbelievably hard.
So how on earth did they cut it so precisely? Well, the answer seems impossible. All the evidence points to one thing. They used a saw with no teeth. I know, it sounds nuts, right?
But this is where their genius just shines. It's a technique called abrasive sawing. Here's how it works. You take a plain copper blade, no teeth, and you just drag it back and forth over the granite. While you're doing that, you keep pouring sand into the cut. See, it wasn't the soft copper saw doing the work. It was the hard sand grinding its way through the stone. It was pure friction. But man, was it slow. We're talking maybe 4 months for one single block.
So, even though we can figure out a lot of these engineering puzzles, the Great Pyramid is still full of secrets. It's a monument to what we know for sure, but also a monument to what we don't.
And that leaves us with the really big questions. Like, what was this thing really for? Was it just a tomb? How many people actually worked on this thing? And of course, the question that we started this whole thing with, what did that little robot actually see behind that stone door? The truth is, we still don't officially know. Researchers are keeping it a pretty tight secret while they analyze everything.
When you get right down to it, the Great Pyramid is so much more than just a pile of rocks. It's proof. It's a testament to what we can do with incredible organization, with science, and just a relentless drive to do something huge. It shows that with enough brain power and teamwork, humans can absolutely make the impossible possible. And that really makes you think, doesn't it? What's the next impossible thing we're going to build?